Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me on this journey into an innovative new way of conceiving biology, one that weaves together the inner workings of our minds, the resilience of living systems, and insights drawn from the quantum realm. Today, I want to introduce you to a framework built around a series of triadic patterns. Think of these patterns as universal templates that reveal how nature organizes itself, from the smallest particle to the complexity of our own thoughts and emotions. By the end of this talk, I hope you'll see biology, and even your own mind, in a fresh and inspiring light. Before we dive in, let's take a brief moment to consider what we often take for granted. We assume our experiences, thoughts, emotions, behaviors are neatly segmented. We imagine life as a chain of isolated causes and effects, yet real life is far richer, an intricate web of feedback loops, unexpected leaps, and hidden harmonies. The triads will capture this richness. Each triad, taken on its own, illuminates a distinct pattern of interaction in nature. But when viewed together, they form a coherent picture, reminding us that mind, biology, and the quantum world all share the same fundamental logic. I invite you to listen with both curiosity and imagination. We'll move through these triads one by one, each time uncovering the logic behind them, their role in sustaining life, and then illustrating how the same pattern appears in everyday experiences and cutting-edge science alike. Let's open our minds to the possibility that these triads are not only abstract concepts, but living principles guiding everything around us. Our destination is an integrated perspective, one that bridges as above, so below. The idea that the structure of the cosmos is echoed in the human mind. From coral reefs to quantum particles, from your next creative spark to a plant's photosynthetic machinery, we will see how each triad transcends boundaries and reveals a shared blueprint of existence. Coexistence is the pattern of reciprocal interaction, where every element influences every other in a continuous mutual flow. Far from being static, it's a process of dynamic balance. In a triad of A, B, and C, no single element stands alone. They all depend upon one another. This interplay is a vibrant dance rather than a linear relay. Everything is happening at once, and no single part can shift without affecting the rest. Within biological systems, coexistence underpins homeostasis. Think about a single cell. Its organelles collaborate to regulate intake, produce energy, and eliminate waste. If the mitochondria falter, energy production declines, forcing the nucleus to adjust gene expression and so on. This process ensures the cell remains balanced in response to changing conditions. The same logic applies on a grander scale to entire ecosystems, where species in a habitat form interdependent webs for nutrient cycling and survival. In the human mind, we can see coexistence in the way thoughts, emotions, and behaviors all interweave. A single positive thought might brighten your mood, which makes healthy choices more appealing, which in turn reinforces your optimistic perspective. It's not a case of thought first, emotion second, action third. Instead, they exist simultaneously, supporting and shaping one another. A mental version of the superposition concept seen in quantum mechanics. When we broaden our perspective to quantum biology, photosynthesis exemplifies coexistence at the molecular level. Light-excited particles called excitons explore multiple energy pathways in tandem, ensuring efficient energy transfer. Much like thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, these excitons don't move in a strict sequence. They exist in overlapping states until a final outcome emerges. Thus, whether in a rainforest or in our inner reflection, coexistence reveals nature's preference for synchrony, where every part holds the others in a mutually supportive embrace. Reinforcement describes a cyclic chain of cause and effect, where A leads to B, B leads to C, and C loops back to reinforce A. It's a logic of momentum building. Once a small spark is introduced, the process takes on a life of its own, amplifying that initial spark through an ever-growing loop of influence. Instead of simply coexisting, the elements actively propel each other, forming a self-sustaining pattern. In biology, reinforcement is the heart of positive feedback mechanisms. Hormones offer a vivid example. A slight increase in one hormone triggers a cascade that elevates levels of another, which circles back to elevate the first. While excessive positive feedback can lead to instability, in the right context it helps organisms swiftly adapt to challenges, such as accelerating labor during childbirth or amplifying immune responses in the face of infection. We see the same cycle in the human mind, particularly in areas like self-confidence. Let's say you start with a belief: I am capable. That belief, A, fosters a feeling of motivation, B, which drives you to tackle a difficult task, C. When you succeed, the original belief is validated, reinforcing your sense of capability and sparking further motivation. This positive loop can also spiral downward in the case of negative self-talk and worry, which underlines why recognizing reinforcement loops is so crucial for mental health. At the quantum level, entanglement echoes this idea of interconnected dynamics that reinforce one another. Changes in one entangled particle instantaneously affect its partner. Though not a perfect parallel to a feedback loop, the sense of rapid mutual influence is strikingly similar. In nature, magnetoreception in migratory birds, believed to stem from entangled electron spins, demonstrates how small quantum changes can guide large-scale biological behavior. From a single thought fueling our self-confidence to quantum spins guiding a bird's flight, reinforcement shows how tiny triggers can escalate into system-wide transformations. Causal logic follows a linear path. If A occurs, then B will follow, and if B occurs, then C will follow. Crucially, if the original cause A never happens, the ultimate outcome C is prevented. This pattern underscores the power of an initiating event. No sequence can arise without that first push. Homeostasis in biological systems frequently relies on straightforward triggers. Think of gene expression, where a particular stimulus leads to the activation of a specific transcription factor. That factor then initiates the production of proteins, which in turn regulate essential processes. If that first step is missing, if the signal never arrives, the genes remain inactive, and the downstream effects simply do not occur. This clear chain of events ensures that the organism only invests energy when certain conditions are met. In our mental experience, causal logic appears most visibly in cognitive behavioral therapy. Imagine a negative thought about one's self-worth. That thought, A, triggers an emotional response like anxiety, B, which could lead to withdrawal or avoidance behaviors, C. If you intervene by challenging that negative assumption, you remove the critical initiating event and derail the cascade. By preventing the negative thought from taking hold, you eliminate the emotional and behavioral fallout that would otherwise follow. At the quantum scale, wave function collapse is an elegant parallel to causality. A quantum system exists in multiple possible states until the act of measurement, the initiating event, collapses it into a definite state. Without that measurement, the system never chooses an outcome. Across the board, this triad demonstrates how a single cause can define a chain of consequences, or conversely, how preventing that cause can preserve a system from unwanted outcomes. Nonlinear describes a path that doesn't follow the expected sequence. A might skip straight to C and then C ends up influencing B in a roundabout way. It reveals the complexity and unpredictability inherent in many natural processes, suggesting that interactions can leap over conventional steps and produce outcomes that aren't always intuitive. In living organisms, nonlinearity is crucial for adaptability. Biological systems often face sudden changes, whether in temperature, resource availability, or threats. Nonlinear feedback loops allow for swift, sometimes drastic responses that can avert danger and re-establish homeostasis. This ability to shift gears quickly, rather than step forward in slow increments, often distinguishes resilient ecosystems and healthy physiological processes from those less capable of handling surprises. When we turn inward, the nonlinear triad appears in our mental processes every time we experience sudden shifts in behavior or mood that aren't clearly preceded by a conscious emotional build-up. Imagine acting on a whim, taking up a new hobby or leaping at an unexpected opportunity, only to feel a wave of excitement and fulfillment afterward. The notion that thought leads to emotion leads to behavior is bypassed. Instead, your action triggers the emotion, undercutting the usual order and reminding us that the human psyche frequently takes quantum-like leaps. Indeed, quantum tunneling provides a striking analogy for such leaps. Particles in a tunneling event pass through barriers that, by classical logic, should be impassable. Similarly, enzymes utilize tunneling to accelerate chemical reactions in ways that defy standard pathways. Both inside our minds and in molecular biology, nonlinear interactions show us that the journey from cause to effect isn't always a straight line. It might zigzag or even skip steps, offering both flexibility and novelty. Harmonic describes a synergy in which any two elements, when they unite, naturally produce the third. It's a logic of integration and alignment, rather than linear cause. If A and B are present, C emerges of its own accord, much like musical chords resolving into a pleasing harmony that feels inevitable. For living systems, harmonic patterns maintain stability through synchronized cooperation. Cells in a heart muscle must pulse together for a steady heartbeat, just as flocks of birds coordinate their movements in mid-air. These harmonized interactions foster balance because the presence of the right combination of signals or actions creates a unifying outcome. This synergy helps organisms and populations function more efficiently, whether by circulating nutrients, maintaining healthy heart rhythms, or warding off predators. In human experience, harmonic often appears as flow states or moments of creative unity. When your thoughts and feelings line up perfectly, the resultant behavior or performance seems effortless. Perhaps you're painting, coding, playing music, or even working on a challenging project. If your mental focus, A, and emotional engagement, B, sync up, the outward expression C feels natural and organic. You lose track of time, immersed in a sense of harmony that arises when disparate parts of your being meld into one. From a quantum standpoint, we see harmonic in phenomena like coherence in photosynthesis. Molecules share a unified phase, effectively acting as one to transfer energy with minimal loss. On a larger scale, ecological communities exhibit harmonic relationships when predator and prey populations move in balanced cycles. There is a deep resonance here. Whenever we observe synergy that makes the whole more than the sum of its parts, we are glimpsing the universal pattern of harmonic. Convergent tells a story of total interconnection, where each element has the power to summon the others. In this triad, if A occurs, then B and C inevitably come forth, and the same applies if B or C gets there first. It's a pattern that highlights how a single spark can mobilize an entire system, revealing a remarkable depth of unity. For biological homeostasis, convergence is essential in processes like cellular signal transduction. A single molecule binding to a receptor can set off multiple downstream pathways at once, ensuring a holistic response that touches every corner of the cell. Even across an entire organism or ecosystem, one trigger, a slight temperature shift, a new source of food, can activate widespread changes, demonstrating how intimately interconnected the various components really are. In the mind, convergent dynamics manifest when a single insight or feeling instantly shifts everything else. Perhaps you've had a eureka moment when understanding dawns, bringing with it a radical change in mood and behavior. Or you experience an overwhelming emotion that radically reframes your thoughts, compelling you to act in line with that new state. This is why profound personal transformations can happen so quickly. Once one pillar moves, the rest realign. At the quantum level, multi-particle entanglement can offer us a window into this phenomenon. A change in one entangled particle may instantly influence the state of many others, making it hard to define where one particle's identity ends and another's begins. Convergence reminds us that boundaries between separate parts often blur, both in the quantum world and in our own inner landscapes, reinforcing the idea that life is an indivisible whole rather than a scattered collection of pieces. When we reflect on these triads, we see that each reveals a thread of universal logic. They describe how systems maintain equilibrium, adapt to changing conditions, and achieve synergy or sudden transformation. Taken together, they illuminate deep truths about how the mind, biology, and even subatomic particles share the same underlying patterns. Perhaps the most exciting implication is that none of these triads stand alone. Instead, they interweave, painting a grand tapestry of life. A single thought can coexist with multiple emotions, loop back to reinforce a belief, or take a non-linear leap. A cell might rely on a causal sequence of gene activations in one context, then swiftly shift into a convergent response in another. We see that nature rarely confines itself to a single pattern. Indeed, it seamlessly moves among them as needed. My hope is that by recognizing these triads in our surroundings and in ourselves, we'll approach both science and daily life with renewed curiosity. We might see that the boundaries we imagine between people, between mind and matter, even between the classical and quantum worlds, are often more permeable than we think. The very same fundamental logos is at play everywhere, reminding us that understanding biology means understanding ourselves, and understanding ourselves means opening our eyes to the living universe in which we are embedded. Thank you for sharing this exploration with me. May these triads inspire you to look at the world, both within and without, with a sense of wonder and a recognition that we are part of a far-reaching, interwoven whole.